I stood in the back row of the cathedral, the scent of lilies heavy in the air, as the choir sang softly for the CEO's funeral. David Holloway had been more than just the head of the company. To me, he had been a mentor, a defender in rooms where no one else spoke my name and, though few knew it, someone who had quietly placed his trust in me above everyone else. The board sat in the front row, their dark suits pressed, their expressions carefully arranged into masks of grief. I knew better. For them, David's death wasn't a tragedy. It was an opportunity. A week earlier, just before his heart failed him, David had asked me into his office. I could still see him sitting behind that oak desk, his voice weaker than usual, yet steady. "Karen," he said, sliding a set of documents across to me. "I trust you more than anyone else here. They'll try to destroy what we built when I'm gone. That's why I'm giving you this." I'd stared at the papers, my hands trembling as I realized what they were. An official transfer of his 51% majority stake, with his signature already notarized. With mine. "You'll know when the time is right," he told me. So, at the funeral, I stayed silent. The board had no idea. They glanced at me occasionally, whispering among themselves as if already carving up the empire he left behind. Let them. 1 week later, I sat across from them in the executive conference room. The air smelled of leather and coffee. Their faces were solemn, but there was a glint of satisfaction none of them could fully hide. "Karen," the chairman began, his tone dripping with false sympathy. "We've reviewed operations, and in light of recent changes, we've decided to terminate your position. Effective immediately. Please pack your belongings and leave." The words should have crushed me. Once upon a time, they would have. But now all I felt was a strange calm. I smiled. "I understand. Thank you for the opportunity." They blinked, caught off guard by my lack of protest. No tears, no pleading, just quiet acceptance. "Security will escort you," one of them added quickly, as if afraid I'd suddenly lash out. I gathered my things without a word, walked past rows of colleagues pretending not to watch, and stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, I caught my own reflection. My lips curved into the smallest of smiles. How fun Monday would be. Back at my apartment, I set the cardboard box on the floor and opened it slowly. Inside were only a few personal items. My mother's pen, a notebook, a framed photo of my niece. Nothing of real value. The real prize was locked away, safe where no one from the company could touch it. 51%. A controlling stake. Enough to fire every single one of them if I wished. But I knew better than to rush. David had warned me. They'll circle like vultures, show them nothing until they reveal themselves first. And they already had. By Friday, I heard the whispers. Former colleagues messaged me. The board was celebrating. Drinks at the club. Toasts to new beginnings. Someone even joked in the break room that I'd probably cry myself to sleep. Let them laugh. Monday, they'd discover what their arrogance had cost them. Still, as I sat in my quiet apartment that night, grief hit me. Not for the job. I had no love for those boardroom games. But for David. He had believed in me when no one else did. When promotions passed me over, when my ideas were stolen in meetings, when I was told to smile more if you want to get ahead, David saw me. He told me I was the sharpest strategist in the room, even when they tried to make me feel invisible. I remembered our last conversation. "They'll underestimate you, Karen," he'd said. "That's your advantage. They'll think you're finished. By the time they realize, it'll be too late." He was right. I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop. On the screen was the folder he'd given me. A detailed outline of board members' hidden dealings, side contracts, and unreported bonuses. Evidence strong enough to burn every last one of them if I wanted. But that wasn't the plan. Not yet. The plan was bigger. I closed the laptop and leaned back, staring out the window at the city lights. The weekend stretched ahead, calm before the storm. I imagined their smug faces Monday morning, their shock when they realized the majority shareholder wasn't one of them. It was me. That thought alone carried me through the night. This wasn't the end of my story. It was only the beginning. Monday morning came earlier than I expected. I woke before the alarm, the silence of my apartment heavy with anticipation. For the first time in years, I didn't have to rush into the office. No hurried coffee, no polite smiles in the elevator. I brewed a fresh pot, sat on my balcony, and watched the city stir awake below me. By now, the board would be gathered in the conference room, congratulating themselves on streamlining operations. They thought I'd vanish quietly into unemployment, maybe beg for a reference, maybe disappear into obscurity. Instead, I was sitting here with something they couldn't imagine. Control. I pulled out the folder again, the legal document David had signed just days before his death. A notarized transfer of his 51% stake, witnessed and validated. It was ironclad. My attorney, Emily Chen, had already reviewed it twice. Her exact words still echoed in my head. "Karen, this is airtight. They'll have no idea what hit them." But David had been clear. I couldn't reveal it too soon. If I walked into that boardroom today waving papers, they'd scramble, rally lawyers, and drag the fight into months of litigation. Number timing was everything. By mid-morning, my phone began buzzing with messages. "Karen, did you really get terminated? They're saying your position was redundant." The board toasted to finally clearing out dead weight. Dead weight. The irony almost made me laugh. Then another message arrived, this one from Nell, one of the few colleagues I trusted. "They're already talking about selling off divisions. Bryce is bragging he'll take over operations. It's chaos." I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the information sink in. They were moving fast, reckless, blinded by their own ambition. Perfect. That afternoon, Emily called. "They'll come at you the moment they realize the truth," she said, her tone crisp, professional. "You're not just an employee anymore. You're the majority shareholder. But until you reveal it, they'll think you're powerless. That's your leverage." "I know," I replied. "David told me to wait for the right moment." "Then wait. But be ready. When you strike, make it final." Her confidence steadied me. Emily wasn't just any lawyer. She specialized in corporate law, sharp enough to dismantle a contract line by line. David had insisted I bring her in months ago, long before his death. He'd been preparing me, even then. That evening, I visited the small office space I'd quietly rented downtown. A modest suite, nothing fancy, but it had one crucial feature: privacy. Away from the board, away from company gossip. Inside, I'd set up a desk, a filing cabinet, and a locked drawer where David's documents rested. I sat at the desk, opened my laptop, and began reviewing the company's quarterly reports. The numbers told a story no one wanted to say aloud. Declining margins, restless investors, and a board desperate to mask the cracks. Without David's steady leadership, they were exposed. And without my 51%, they were doomed. Still, doubt crept in as night fell. Was I really ready for this? To face a room full of men twice my age, all of them seasoned in politics and manipulation? They would mock me, dismiss me, fight me. I remembered the countless times I'd been talked over in meetings, my ideas stolen and rephrased by someone else. The promotions I was promised, then denied. The times I stayed late to fix problems others caused, only to watch them get credit. I clenched my jaw. I was ready. David hadn't chosen me out of pity. He'd chosen me because he knew I had the patience to outlast them, the foresight to see the bigger game. On Sunday night, the board had already started their power plays. Bryce called me unexpectedly. His voice was smug, pretending to be sympathetic. "Karen, I heard you left the company. Tough break. If you're looking for opportunities, maybe I can put in a word elsewhere. I almost laughed out loud. Instead, I kept my tone neutral. That's generous of you. Of course, we have to look out for each other, right? He chuckled. Anyway, I'll be announcing some new initiatives this week. Exciting times ahead. Congratulations, Bryce, I replied softly. When I hung up, my smile returned. By next week, Bryce's initiatives wouldn't matter at all. Monday evening, I stood by the window of my apartment, the city lights flickering against the glass. Tomorrow, I would walk into that building not as the woman they fired, but as the owner of the very company they thought they controlled. The thought steadied me, but it also carried weight. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about proving what David had always told me, that real power isn't loud. It's quiet, patient, waiting until the exact moment when silence breaks into thunder. I poured myself another glass of wine, whispering into the night. Tomorrow. The game was about to begin. The next morning, I dressed with deliberate care. A navy suit, understated but sharp. Nothing flashy, nothing that could be dismissed as a performance. If today was going to matter, and it would, I needed to look like what I was. Calm, prepared, inevitable. When I arrived at the building, security hesitated at first. After all, the board had fired me. But I handed them a sealed envelope with my attorney's letterhead. Inside were instructions from Emily Chen, citing my position as majority shareholder and my right to attend any board meeting. Their faces changed instantly. Within minutes, I was being escorted upstairs, not as an employee this time, but as something they hadn't yet grasped. The boardroom was exactly as I remembered. Polished mahogany table, leather chairs, a wall of glass overlooking the skyline. The men around the table looked up, surprise flickering across their faces when I entered. "What is she doing here?" Bryce muttered, already frowning. I set my briefcase down gently before answering. "Good morning, gentlemen. I believe I have every right to be here." The chairman cleared his throat. "Karen, this meeting is for board members only. As you know, your employment was terminated last week." I slid the folder across the table. "Then you'll want to read this." There was a pause as he opened the document. His expression shifted slowly. Confusion, disbelief, then dawning horror. The others leaned in, eyes scanning the notarized signatures, the legal seals, David's handwriting. Finally, the chairman looked up, his face pale. This can't be real." "It's very real," I replied evenly. 3 days before his death, David Holloway transferred his 51% majority stake to me. That makes me the controlling shareholder of this company. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning. Then Bryce slammed his fist on the table. "This is outrageous. You expect us to believe he'd hand over control to you of all people?" I met his glare without flinching. "Believe whatever you want. The paperwork is valid, witnessed, notarized, and filed. I've already spoken to my attorney. As of this moment, your authority is subject to my approval." The room erupted. Half the board began whispering urgently. Others rifled through the documents as if hoping to find a mistake. Bryce's voice cut through the noise, harsh and bitter. "She's bluffing. She has no experience, no standing. David would never trust her with this." "Funny," I said softly, "because he did. And unlike you, Bryce, he valued results over politics." His face reddened. "You think you can just walk in here and take over?" "I don't think," I answered, leaning forward. "I know." At that moment, the chairman tried to regain control. "Even if this arrangement is valid, Karen, surely you understand the challenges. Investors, clients, employees. This revelation could destabilize everything." I let the words hang for a beat before replying. "Destabilize? Or restore confidence? Because let's be clear, without David, your house of cards was already collapsing. I've seen the reports. Declining margins, restless investors, deals slipping through your fingers. You've been covering cracks with paint. David knew it. That's why he chose me. The truth of my words silenced them more than the documents had. They knew I was right. The numbers didn't lie. Just then my phone buzzed. I let it ring, deliberately placing it face up on the table. The name flashing across the screen was one they all recognized. Anderson Holdings, our largest institutional investor. The timing couldn't have been better. "Excuse me," I said, answering calmly. "Yes, this is Karen Ellis." The board watched, straining to hear as I listened. Then I nodded. "Of course, I'll meet with you this afternoon. Yes, we'll discuss the future of the company." I ended the call and set the phone down. "They already know," I said quietly, "and they're ready to talk." The look on Bryce's face was priceless, shock giving way to fear. For the next hour, the board scrambled. They demanded clarifications, questioned the legality, tried to argue technicalities. I answered each calmly, one by one, citing the legal validations Emily had prepared. They could delay, yes, but they couldn't undo the fact. The company was now mine to steer. Finally, I stood, gathering my papers. "Gentlemen, I'll give you the rest of the day to adjust to the new reality. Tomorrow morning, we'll reconvene. And then we'll discuss restructuring, properly this time." Without waiting for a response, I left the room. The hallway outside was lined with assistants and staff pretending not to eavesdrop. Their eyes followed me, curious, unsure. I offered a small, calm smile as I walked past. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of power settle into place. Not revenge, not yet. This was something bigger. David's words echoed in my mind. "They'll underestimate you, Karen. That's your advantage." And they had. Spectacularly. The board didn't wait until tomorrow to panic. By noon, the emails started. First from the company's secretary, then from their outside counsel. Words like contest, capacity, temporary restraining order showed up in bold. They were going to argue David hadn't been of sound mind when he signed. I stared at the screen until the apartment light reflected in the glass looked like a second, colder moon. Emily called before I could dial her. "They'll go after capacity," she said, not even saying hello. "We prepared for this. You have the notarization, the physician's attestation from the same week, and the 2 witness statements. I've filed a motion for a status quo order. No asset sales, no executive changes, no big contracts, until ownership is resolved." "Will a judge grant it?" "Delaware Chancery likes preserving the status quo. We're on solid ground. Focus on investors." "Right. Investors." I took the elevator to the 32nd floor of Anderson Holdings at 2 p.m. The receptionist's smile was professional. The conference room was glass and steel, the skyline a thin blue line behind it. Victoria Hale, lean, early 50s, the kind of calm that comes from seeing everything twice. Shook my hand and sat. "We want stability," she said. "Not drama. Tell me why you should have our support." I didn't talk about betrayal or boardroom whispers. I talked about numbers. Cash burn is up 11% year over year while realized revenue is flat. Client churn is creeping from 6% to 9%. The board's response has been cosmetic. Headcount moves, press releases, no operational fix. My 90-day plan: freeze non-essential spend, audit every auto-renew contract, shift bonuses from top-line bookings to gross margin, create a retention triage for the top 50 clients with named owners, and bring in an interim COO with P&L discipline. "Who?" Victoria asked. 2 names David vetted. Sheila Park from Riverton and Adrian Cole, ex-Eastmark. Both have standing offers to consult. I have their availability. She didn't blink. "And governance?" "I'll use shareholder written consent to refresh the board. 3 seats replaced by operators with no ties to current leadership. An independent audit chair within 30 days. Publicly commit to a say-on-pay policy. Quarterly investor calls with segment detail. No more black boxes. Victoria folded her hands. If the court keeps the status quo and your stake stands, Anderson will support you. Conditionally. Deliver the consent, name the interim COO, and keep us briefed twice weekly. You'll have our letter by morning. I exhaled for the first time in hours. Thank you. On the sidewalk outside, my phone buzzed again. Nell. They're telling staff you forged documents. Bryce said you preyed on a dying man. HR ordered IT to pull your emails. I stopped walking. Are they wiping records? Trying. The head of InfoSec refused without a board resolution. He asked for the general counsel's sign-off. They don't have it. Good, I said, and meant it. Not just strategically. Some people still had spines. Back home, Emily's email was waiting. A scanned letter on hospital letterhead, signed by David's physician the week he signed the transfer. Patient is of sound mind and fully oriented, cleared to execute legal decisions. We'd never wanted to use it. Now it was a shield. At 6 p.m., a push alert hit my phone. Industry Weekly. Exclusive ousted VP challenges board with claim to majority stake. The article quoted a senior executive calling me unstable and opportunistic. I read the words twice. They stung exactly once. I responded the way David taught me to respond. Quietly. I forwarded the piece to Victoria with a single line. We will not engage in press theatrics, execution only. Her reply came fast. Good answer. By 7, Emily and I were at her office finalizing the shareholder consent. It was 3 pages and a grenade. Removal of directors A, B, and C. Appointment of directors P, Q, and R. Ratification of interim operating authority for the chief operating officer. I signed slowly, the way you might sign a condolence card, knowing someone's world would change when they read it. Process servers go out at 8, Emily said. They'll be on doorsteps by 9. And the court? Hearing at 10 a.m. tomorrow. We're asking that no personnel changes occur without your consent. If granted, Bryce's empire building pauses. Pauses. I repeated. Patience again. Always patience. We walked the packet to the lobby together. On impulse, I asked, do you ever get used to this part? The part where people show you who they are? She said. I hope not. On the way home, I detoured past the office tower. Through the glass, I could see the glow of the boardroom, silhouettes moving, hands cutting the air. I thought about the times I'd stayed there past midnight fixing someone else's mess while those same silhouettes toasted each other across town. I pulled my coat tighter and kept walking. At 9:12 p.m., Bryce called from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. His message was a mix of threat and faux concern. Karen, be reasonable. You don't know what you're doing. This will ruin you. Come in tomorrow, we'll find you. A soft landing. I forwarded it to Emily. Preserve. Nell texted a photo a few minutes later. A white envelope taped to the boardroom door. Service of shareholder written consent stamped in blue. Under it, a second photo. Bryce's face, mid-argument, eyes hard. They're rattled, she wrote. InfoSec just locked the email purge. GC finally intervened, small wins. Necessary ones. Around midnight, I opened David's old notebook, the one with his shorthand and neat arrows between names. Next to Bryce, he'd written, short-term thinker. Corner him with timelines. Next to the chairman, hates public embarrassment. Loves process. Use it. Beside my name, he'd written one line. Steady hands. I closed the notebook and set it beside my phone. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., a judge would decide whether chaos or calm would govern the next week. At 11, if we held the line, I'd reconvene the board. My board. For the first time. I turned off the lamp. In the dark, the city hummed, indifferent and alive. Power wasn't a roar. It was a pulse you learned to keep. And in the steady space between heartbeats, I could hear David clearly. Let them move first, then make it final. The courthouse was crowded that morning, but when the judge granted the status quo order, the board's last illusion of control shattered. No asset sales, no firings, no new contracts. Nothing without my consent. Bryce left the courtroom red-faced, whispering furiously to the chairman. I didn't need to hear the words. I already knew the conversation. We've lost. At 11 sharp, I reconvened the board. This time, I sat at the head of the table. 3 new directors, serious, competent, independent, took their seats without fanfare. The old guard glared, their outrage muted by the legal order in my briefcase. I'll be brief, I began. The company belongs to its clients, its employees, and its shareholders, not to personal egos. That ends today. Bryce, your resignation is effective immediately. Compensation frozen pending audit. His mouth opened, then closed again. The chairman shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. One by one, their power drained away, not through shouting, not through spectacle, just through paperwork and patience. By the afternoon, investors had issued statements supporting the transition. Staff received a company-wide email. Effective immediately, Karen Ellis will assume operating authority as majority shareholder and interim chair. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages, some congratulatory, some stunned. Nell's text made me smile. Never seen so many people suddenly remember your name. Yet as the day wound down, I sat alone in my office overlooking the city, a framed photo of David on the desk beside me. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was responsibility. He hadn't handed me 51% for revenge. He'd done it because he believed I would protect what he built from those who would hollow it out. I whispered into the quiet. I hope I did it right. The truth is, revenge had never been the goal. Justice was. And sometimes justice looks less like fireworks and more like silence. Steady, unshaken, final. By evening, the building was nearly empty. I walked the quiet halls, remembering the years I'd spent being overlooked, talked over, underestimated. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had fired me to erase me, and in doing so, they handed me the one thing they could never take back. Control. That night, I closed the office door behind me, the city lights stretching ahead. Tomorrow would bring audits, meetings, rebuilding, hard work. But for the first time, it would be on my terms. And that was the real victory.